When I first heard the low thump behind the wall, I thought it was the pipes again. Our house was old, one of those charming two-story homes that looked like it had stories of its own to tell. But that sound, it wasn't the pipes. It came from somewhere deep inside the walls, a hollow rhythm that didn't belong. I remember standing barefoot in the hallway, the floor cool against my feet, listening. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for that faint creak, like someone was moving behind the drywall. I called out his name softly. Michael? No answer, only the sound of my own breathing. That was the first time I realized there were things in this home, in our marriage, that I didn't know. When we first bought the house, it felt like a dream come true. Michael and I had been married for 6 years. We'd gone through our share of struggles, student loans, long commutes, a miscarriage that had almost broken me, but we'd made it through. When we stood in front of that white two-story with the blue shutters, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "This is our new beginning." I wanted to believe him. I really did. We spent that first month painting rooms, hanging curtains, arguing about where the sofa should go. I'd bake muffins in the kitchen while he tinkered in the garage, pretending to fix something but mostly just escaping the smell of paint. We laughed. We dreamed. We made plans for a nursery we hadn't even started yet. Michael was a builder, not by trade, but by obsession. He loved working with his hands. I'd often find him up late in the basement, drilling, hammering, measuring. "It keeps me sane," he'd say with that crooked grin that once melted me. I admired it. I thought, this man takes pride in our home. But somewhere between admiration and trust, I stopped asking questions. One night, I woke up to the faint buzz of a text message. His phone lit up the dark room, flashing across his face. He was smiling, not the sleepy, drowsy kind of smile, but one that looked alive. I pretended to turn over in my sleep, my heart suddenly awake. The phone vibrated again. He slipped out of bed, moving quietly, too quietly. I heard the creak of the stairs, the soft click of the basement door closing. For a few minutes, I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling something inside me shift, something small but sharp. Curiosity mixed with fear. The kind of fear that tells you deep down you're about to uncover something you can't unsee. The next morning, he was cheerful. Too cheerful. "Morning, babe," he said, pouring me coffee like nothing had happened. "You sleep okay?" I nodded, watching him carefully. He looked rested, happy. I wanted to ask where he'd gone in the middle of the night, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I smiled back. "Yeah, you?" He leaned in and kissed my forehead. Best sleep I've had in weeks. That was Michael, charming, calm, with just enough warmth to make me doubt my instincts. A few days later, I found the first clue. I was looking for a spare set of light bulbs in the storage cabinet in the basement. The air was cool and smelled faintly of sawdust. Behind a stack of paint cans, I noticed something odd, a thin line in the wall, running perfectly straight from the floor to the ceiling. It didn't match the rest of the concrete pattern. I pressed my palm against it. Hollow. When I knocked, the echo came back sharper, closer, as if there was space behind it. Just then, I heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy, deliberate. Michael's voice followed, calling out, "Honey, you down there?" My pulse quickened. I stepped back from the wall, pretending to be busy with the boxes. "Yeah, just looking for light bulbs." He appeared at the top of the stairs, his silhouette framed by the weak bulb above. "Be careful down there," he said, his tone light but watchful. "Don't touch anything on the back wall, okay? I've got a project going." "A project?" I smiled, faintly nodding. "Got it." But inside, the unease was spreading. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The air between us felt heavy, filled with words unsaid. Around midnight, I slipped out of bed and walked to the kitchen. From the window above the sink, I could see the faint light of the basement flickering. He was down there again. The shadow of his body moved back and forth across the frosted glass. I couldn't see clearly, but I heard the faint sound of drilling, and something metallic sliding shut. I gripped the counter, feeling cold sweat on my neck. What was he building? The next morning, I decided to look again. When he left for work, I waited a full 20 minutes before heading downstairs. The same wall, the same faint line. I traced it again, this time pressing my ear to it. Nothing. But then, my fingers found something small, a metal ridge near the bottom, half hidden under the baseboard. I pulled gently. A latch. With one slow, shaking movement, I lifted it. The wall didn't swing open, it shifted, sliding sideways with a faint scrape, revealing a narrow doorway. A smell hit me immediately, something musky, like perfume mixed with cigarette smoke. I stepped inside. The room was small, maybe 10 feet wide, 12 long. A bed sat against one wall, sheets slightly rumpled. A lamp flickered weakly beside it. On the desk, a pile of papers, receipts, and a photo. Michael, smiling, with another woman. My knees went weak. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the picture. Her face was pressed close to his. She wore a dress I didn't recognize. They looked happy. Too happy. There were other things too, clothes, toiletries, even a second phone. My throat tightened. The truth was sitting all around me, in this secret little world he'd built beneath our home. That was the moment my love for him began to die. Quietly, without a sound, I heard his car pull into the driveway above. The front door opened. I froze. I tried to brush it off as my imagination. We had just moved into a new house, after all, old pipes, settling wood, unfamiliar sounds. But deep down, something gnawed at me. It wasn't just the noises. It was Daniel. He had become distracted. Distant. The kind of distance that isn't about space, but about walls, invisible ones. He would disappear into the basement for hours, claiming he was fixing the wiring or checking the foundation. But every time I offered to help, he'd smile, that same polite, dismissive smile, and say, "You don't need to get your hands dirty, honey." At first, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. We'd been through so much together. I told myself he was just nesting. Men can get obsessive about new homes. But the longer it went on, the more uneasy I felt. One night, I woke up to the faint sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They weren't coming from upstairs or the hallway. They were below me. The basement. I checked the clock. It was 2:43 a.m. My chest tightened as I slid out of bed. The floorboards groaned under my feet as I tiptoed toward the staircase. There was no light, but I could hear movement, soft metallic clinks, the sound of a latch, and then silence. When I reached the basement door, I froze. It was locked. Daniel never locked the basement. That's when the first real fear set in. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that settles in your gut like a stone. The next morning, I mentioned it casually over breakfast. "Hey, why did you lock the basement last night?" He didn't even look up from his coffee. "I didn't," he said flatly. "You must have dreamed that." His voice was calm. Too calm. I remember staring at him, watching how his jaw flexed, how his hand gripped the mug tighter than usual. I smiled weakly and changed the subject. But from that moment on, I started watching him more closely. A few days later, while Daniel was at work, I went downstairs. I told myself it was harmless, just checking the boxes, making sure the paint hadn't peeled. But deep down, I was looking for something. Anything. The basement looked normal enough. Tools, boxes, paint cans, old furniture. But near the back wall, where the concrete met the old wooden frame, I noticed something odd. A seam. A perfectly straight vertical line that didn't match the rest of the wall. I ran my fingers along it. It felt smooth, too smooth, like new wood painted to look old. And then, just as I leaned closer, I heard the garage door creak open upstairs. He was home early. I panicked, dropped the flashlight, scrambled upstairs, and pretended I was cleaning the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. When he walked in, he looked surprised. "You're home early," I said quickly. "Yeah," he said, setting his keys down. Meeting got canceled, but there was something else in his eyes. A flicker of suspicion. Later that night, I noticed he put a small padlock on the basement door. That's when I knew. There was something down there he didn't want me to see. The following week, Daniel became more secretive. Late-night phone calls. Whispers in the garage. He started showering in the guest bathroom, a habit he'd never had before. When I asked why, he laughed it off. "Water pressure's better," he said. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But one evening, while folding laundry, I noticed his work shirt had lipstick on the collar. Not bright red, a soft rose shade. The kind I never wore. I stared at it for a long time, numb. He must have sensed I'd seen it, because the next few days, he became overly attentive. Flowers. Compliments. Even breakfast in bed. And that's when it hit me, guilt. He was trying to bury it, but I couldn't unsee that lipstick. 2 nights later, I made my move. I waited until he fell asleep, his soft snoring filling the room. Then I crept downstairs, quiet as a ghost. The basement door was locked, but I'd found the spare key earlier, tucked inside an old toolbox. I opened the door, heart pounding in my ears, and stepped into the darkness. The air was heavy, damp. The faint hum of electricity filled the space. I pointed the flashlight toward the back wall. The seam was there. I pressed against it. Nothing. Then I noticed a small latch near the floor, hidden behind a bucket. I pulled it. A section of the wall swung open, revealing a narrow hallway lined with plywood and insulation. And at the end of it, a door. A new door. My hands were trembling as I reached for the knob. It was unlocked. Inside, the room was small but meticulously arranged, like someone had built a tiny apartment. A single bed, a small desk, a mirror, and on the desk, papers. I stepped closer. My flashlight beam trembled as I read the top document. It was a mortgage. A second mortgage. In his name only. My breath caught. Then another paper, rental receipts. He'd been renting this room. To someone. And then my stomach dropped. There was a photo frame lying face down on the bed. I picked it up. It was Daniel, smiling, his arm wrapped around a woman I didn't know. My knees went weak. The pieces started falling together. The late nights, the phone calls, the money issues. He hadn't just been hiding a room. He'd been hiding another life. I sat on that bed for what felt like hours, staring at that picture until my tears blurred the faces. When I finally stood up, I knew one thing. This couldn't stay buried. Tomorrow, I would confront him, and I wouldn't do it alone. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling while the silence pressed down like a weight. Daniel slept peacefully, as if he hadn't built a lie beneath our home. I kept replaying every small detail in my head. The nights he said he was working late, the sudden bank withdrawals, the tight smiles when I asked about money. It all fit now. The secret room, the documents, the woman in the picture. By morning, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was done. I made a few quiet phone calls to his parents, to mine. Come by tonight, I told them. It's important. I didn't give details. I wanted him to face this truth not in the dark, but in the light of the people who had always believed in him. That day was painfully slow. Daniel left for work as usual, kissing my cheek on his way out. His touch felt cold. I waited until his car disappeared down the street, then went back to the basement. This time, I looked deeper. Behind a small cabinet, I found a black box, a lockbox, the kind you'd use to hide something valuable. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were papers, more photos, and a cheap gold bracelet. The bracelet had initials engraved inside. LM. I didn't know an LM. There was also a notebook. Inside, I found entries in his handwriting, dates, names, payments. Notes about meeting L at the room. Mentions of keeping her happy. The loan. Keeping things quiet. Each line burned through me like acid. He hadn't just been cheating. He'd been borrowing money against our home to keep another woman in comfort. The man I trusted with my life had turned our dream into a stage for deceit. By the time evening came, I'd set everything up. The documents were laid out on the dining table, the mortgage papers, the photos, the receipts, the bracelet. I placed the notebook right on top. At 7 sharp, the doorbell rang. His parents came first. His mother, Marjorie, looked worried. Is everything all right, dear? She asked, touching my arm. I just nodded. You'll see. My parents arrived a few minutes later, confused but calm. I asked them all to sit down in the living room. Then we waited. When Daniel finally walked through the door, his usual cheerful, "I'm home," died in his throat. He froze when he saw everyone, then his eyes landed on the table, and the color drained from his face. What's this? He asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel that silence, heavy, unrelenting. Why don't you tell them, Daniel? I said finally. My voice was steady, almost too calm. Tell them what you've been doing in the basement. His jaw clenched. This is ridiculous, Emma. Is it? I took a step closer, holding up the photo. Then explain this. He swallowed hard. His mother looked from me to him, confused and trembling. Daniel, what is that? He rubbed a hand over his face. It's not what it looks like. Oh, I said. Because it looks like you built a secret room under our house to hide another woman and a second mortgage. The room went silent. My father stood, his face hardening. His mother gasped, covering her mouth. Daniel's voice cracked as he said, I was in trouble, okay? I had debts. I needed money, and she helped me. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She helped you? I snapped. By moving into our home? By using my kitchen while I was upstairs cooking dinner for you? He didn't answer. His eyes were wet now, desperate. Emma, please, he whispered. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I could fix it before you found out. Fix it? I laughed bitterly. You lied to me for months, Daniel. You mortgaged our house, the home we built together, for your affair. And you think you can just fix that? His father, who had been silent until now, spoke up. You've shamed this family, son. His voice was heavy, disappointed. You lied to your wife. You deceived everyone. Daniel tried to speak, but his mother was crying quietly, shaking her head. I turned to them and said softly, I just needed you all to see the truth. I'm not crazy. I'm not paranoid. I was living with a man who built a lie beneath my feet. Then I looked back at Daniel. I want you out of this house by tomorrow. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. You can't just throw me out of my own home. Our home, I corrected. And yes, I can because I'm done living with secrets. I walked upstairs, leaving him standing there, surrounded by the evidence of his own betrayal. Later that night, I sat on the porch alone. The air was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the silence. Inside, I could hear muffled voices, his mother pleading, his father scolding, but I felt strangely calm. I had thought this house was my dream come true. I hadn't realized it would also be the place where I'd wake up to the truth to myself. And in that stillness, I made a quiet promise. I would not let this break me. I would rebuild, not the house, but me. The next morning, I woke up to a silence that felt heavier than usual. For a moment, I forgot. I reached out across the bed and felt nothing but cool sheets. Then I remembered. Daniel's side was empty, just like the promises he'd left behind. I went downstairs. The table was cleared, the documents gone. Only a faint scent of his cologne lingered in the air, sharp and bitter. He'd packed during the night. I looked around our home, the walls we painted together, the curtains I'd chosen, the floor we argued about when we were remodeling. Everything had a memory attached to it. And yet, it all felt foreign now, as if the life we built together had been quietly erased. For a long while, I stood in that empty kitchen, letting the stillness settle into me. Then I took a deep breath and began cleaning. It sounds small, maybe even foolish, but it was how I started taking back control, one surface, one room, one act of reclaiming my space at a time. In the days that followed, people started calling. His mother came by first. Her face was swollen from crying. Emma, I'm so sorry, she said softly. I didn't raise him to be like this. I took her hand. I know, I said. You don't have to apologize for him. She nodded, but tears still fell. He's staying with us for now. He's ashamed, Emma. He wants to make it right. I smiled faintly, though my heart ached. There's no right to make, I said. Some things don't get fixed. They just end. She looked down, nodding. I hugged her, and for a brief moment, I felt compassion, not for him, but for her, because she'd lost something too. A week later, I met with a lawyer. We went through the paperwork, the secret mortgage, the hidden debt. It would take months, maybe a year, to straighten it all out. But I wasn't scared anymore. When I signed those papers, I wasn't signing as a broken woman. I was signing as someone who had learned the hard way that silence is not peace, and ignorance is not love. I began working extra hours, picking up small projects, calling old clients. Slowly, the business and my confidence began to recover. And though the basement door still made me shiver, I made myself go down there one last time. I turned on the light, looked around the empty room he'd built in secret, and whispered, You don't control this space anymore. Then I locked the door and never opened it again. Months passed. The seasons changed. The house began to feel like mine again. I started gardening, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I planted marigolds by the porch, roses near the window, and mint by the back steps. Some mornings, I'd sit with my coffee and listen to the wind move through the leaves. It was quiet, but not empty. I filled that silence with gratitude for the lessons, for the strength I didn't know I had, and for the peace that comes only after losing everything false. One afternoon, Daniel showed up. He didn't call first. I saw his car through the window, the same blue sedan that used to pull into the driveway at sunset. When I opened the door, he stood there holding a small envelope. His eyes were tired, his face thinner. Can we talk? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, I said. He stepped inside, glancing around as if the house were a stranger now. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he began, his voice cracked. I lost everything, Emma. The business deals, the house you. I don't even know who I am anymore. I looked at him, not with anger, but with clarity. That's the problem, I said. You built your life on lies. You don't recognize yourself because you never lived honestly. He nodded slowly, tears filling his eyes. I know. I just wanted you to know. I regret it. Every bit of it. I took the envelope from his hand. Inside was a check, partial repayment from selling his car. Use it to pay down the debt, he said quietly. I folded it, placed it on the counter, and met his gaze. I don't hate you, Daniel, I said softly. But I can't carry you anymore. I carried your dreams, your mistakes, your secrets. It's time I carry myself. He swallowed, nodded, and turned to leave. Before he walked out the door, he whispered, You always deserved better than me. I didn't respond. I just watched as he drove away for the last time. That evening, I lit a candle in the kitchen. I sat at the table with a cup of tea and my journal, something I'd started doing to heal. I wrote, Some wounds don't close easily, but they teach you where your skin is thin and where your heart is strong. Love doesn't always save us. Sometimes it breaks us open so we can finally see who we are. Then I closed the journal and smiled faintly to myself, because in that moment, I knew I'd be okay. Weeks later, I began hosting small gatherings, women from my neighborhood, a few friends, even Marjorie sometimes. We'd share stories, laugh, cry a little. And one evening, as the sun dipped low, I realized I wasn't telling a story about loss anymore. I was telling one about survival. The house no longer felt haunted by secrets. It felt lived in, honest, imperfect, but peaceful. And I thought to myself, maybe that's what real love is, not what you build with someone else, but what you rebuild within yourself after it all falls apart. The secret room my husband built. Sometimes the walls we build to feel safe end up hiding the truth we most need to see. My husband built a secret room, but what he was really hiding was himself, his guilt, his fear, his weakness. And maybe, in some small way, I was hiding too, behind the idea that love could fix what honesty never touched. I've learned that when someone builds a wall of lies, you can't live your life trying to decorate it. You have to tear it down, brick by brick, even if your hands bleed in the process. Because peace doesn't come from pretending. It comes from facing the silence after the storm and realizing you're still standing. If you've ever found yourself standing in the ruins of someone else's deception, remember this: forgiveness is not weakness. It's the decision to stop carrying what was never yours to hold. I still live in that house. The secret room is gone now. In its place, I built a reading corner, a small, bright space filled with sunlight and soft laughter when my nieces visit. That's the thing about healing. It takes time, but it always grows where truth is planted. Would you have opened that secret room, or would you have let it stay hidden? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe that truth and healing go hand in hand, subscribe to Stories by Aunt May for more real stories of heartbreak, courage, and redemption.